Om Anando Brahmeti Vyajanat Anandadhyeva Kalvimani Bhutani Jayante Anandena Jatani Jivanti Anandam Prayantyavisam Vishanti. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Delight indeed is Brahman. From delight all beings are born. By delight they exist. To delight they return. Om peace, peace, peace. Taittiriya Upanishad 3.6. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Nice to see you all. I was in Texas for almost 2 weeks. Had a nice time in visiting our different centers, Austin, Houston, and Dallas. And it's nice to be back. It was incredibly hot there. And I studied at Berkeley, where I really like Northern California weather. When I would complain about Southern California being too hot. And now after spending time in Texas, I appreciate LA weather more. So let's have some fun today. We're talking about Sri Ramakrishna's jokes. One thing that stands out about the gospel is that when you read it, you find that it's full of humor and laughter. In fact, if you do a keyword search on the online version and you type in laugh, laughter, you'll find that one of the most common phrases in the gospel is all laugh. In Bangla, it's shokoler hashyo. It's on almost every page of the gospel. Sri Ramakrishna is always making others laugh, telling jokes, cracking jokes, having fun, making fun of other people, having fun with other people. So I want to talk about his jokes today because I think there's a lot of significance in it that we might overlook if we're just reading the gospel. But let's think a little bit more deeply about why Sri Ramakrishna is so hilarious, what the spiritual purpose is behind his telling jokes, making people laugh. So, because I'm a philosopher, I have to start with the definition. So let's first define a joke. So from the Oxford Dictionary, a joke is, quote, a thing that someone says to cause amusement or laughter. So I like this because it's a very general definition. Some of us, when we hear joke, we think that it's something very specific. There has to be a setup and then there's a punchline. But I want to define jokes much more broadly. Anything one says to make others laugh. Or with the aim of making others laugh. It doesn't always work. People don't always laugh, but a successful joke is one that makes other people laugh. So let's keep in mind that broader definition of jokes here. You'll find that a lot of Sri Ramakrishna's jokes, they don't necessarily have a setup and a punchline structure like that, but it's a joke nonetheless. So, to help kind of really appreciate what's most unique and incredible about Sri Ramakrishna's humor, about his jokes, I think it helps to have a little bit of background, philosophical background. So let me delve briefly into 3 of the major Western philosophical approaches to humor and jokes. Okay. And the key question here, the philosophical question is, why do we laugh at jokes? Why do we value humor at all? And there's a whole subfield of philosophy called the philosophy of humor, where they present different theories explaining the value and importance of humor. So here are 3. First one is called the superiority theory of humor. Some of the greatest philosophical minds in the West have supported this theory. Plato, Aristotle, John Hobbes. The theory is, when we laugh at a joke, that laughter expresses a feeling of superiority over something, over others, basically. That's the idea. We're laughing at another person's expense when we laugh at a joke. And so, if we think about it in this way, there's a kind of a negative tinge to it already, you can tell, right? And that's not a coincidence. And so you'll find Plato, who advocates this theory, condemns laughter and says we should ban it from the Republic. He wrote a famous book called The Republic. He says, in this ideal republic, joking is not allowed. It's inappropriate because it kind of puffs up your ego and pride, because it makes you feel superior over other people. It gets much worse with the Christian monks. because they follow a similar superiority theory of humor. So I'll just give you a couple examples. Saint Benedict, he wrote what's called the ladder of humility. How do we develop humility? Step 10, so it has different steps. Step 10 is a restraint against laughter. Don't laugh. If you're laughing, you're not spiritual. Step 11, don't joke. Joking is not spiritual. Some of these Christian monks go even further. There's a monastery, I think in the Middle Ages, of Saint Columbanus Hibernus. Punishments, physical punishments for joking and laughing. So this is a direct quotation. He who smiles in the service, the religious service, 6 strokes, 6 lashes. If he breaks out in the noise of laughter, a special fast, unless it has happened pardonably. It's very funny. So thank God we're Vedantins. Okay, so that's the first theory of humor. And you might say, well, it's just not the case that all jokes stem from a feeling of superiority. It's an overgeneralization. There are many jokes in which there's no question of feeling superior over other people. There are other problems with that theory, but in any case, we're not going into that. I just want to mention briefly the 3 theories. First, the superiority theory. We laugh at jokes because it makes us feel superior over another group of people or other people. Second theory, common in the West, especially in the 19th century and early 20th century. It's called the relief theory. When we laugh at a joke, we are relieving ourselves of excess energy of some sort, whether that's nervous energy or psychic energy that's built up, that's kind of pent up in our system, and so that gives us pleasure. So, for instance, Herbert Spencer, this is one of the philosophers that Swami Vivekananda sometimes mentioned in his complete works. He has an article published in 1911 called On the Physiology of Laughter. And his main claim is that laughter releases pent-up nervous energy generated by our emotions in our day-to-day life. So it's like a release valve for our emotions. But the most famous advocate for this relief theory is Sigmund Freud, the great Austrian psychoanalyst. He wrote an entire book on jokes. Have any of you read it? It's called Jokes and Their Relation to the Unconscious, 1905. Most of you at least have some understanding of the basic ideas of Freud. He placed tremendous importance on the unconscious and the way that the unconscious influences our conscious lives without us knowing it, right? And so, lo and behold, he gives a similar theory of jokes, which is that at the unconscious level, we have all sorts of feelings and desires which are sort of shameful to us, in which we kind of hide both to others and to ourselves. One of the most fundamental is lust. That's why he was so obsessed with sex. But there are others. Hostility toward other groups is another thing that's often racism. Racism actually, conscious manifestations, expressions of racism are almost always expressions of a deeper unconscious feeling of superiority or hostility toward another group of people. And so we spend a lot of our psychic energy in our conscious lives and our daily lives repressing these unconscious feelings, unconscious desires, unconscious hostility toward others. And he says, it's not a coincidence that many jokes that we laugh at tend to be either sexual in nature or express some form of hostility toward another group. Dumb blondes, there's so many examples of, Why? It's because we have these unconscious feelings and desires that we release those we spend a tremendous amount of psychic energy repressing those unconscious feelings. When we laugh at a joke, we release that pent-up psychic energy, and we feel relief. So this is roughly Freud's view. Third dominant theory, and this is probably of the 3 theories the most dominant now in contemporary philosophy of humor. It's called the incongruity theory. Some very famous philosophers supported this view. Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, Arthur Schopenhauer, Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher. The basic idea is that the cause of laughter is the perception of something incongruous. We're expecting one thing, and the joke delivers us something else. And we laugh as a result. We have certain expectations, and those expectations are defied, and we laugh. You'll find that this is this is why the kind of standard setup punchline structure of jokes works, because a punchline almost always reverses our expectations, right? I'll give you one example. Of course, you can come up with your own. Part of the reason why I choose this joke, first of all, because it's very short. Second of all, well, anyway, let me say the joke. Okay, so, most of you haven't heard of it, probably, I'm hoping. This is from Reader's Digest 2003. So I'm hoping that this is new to you. Okay, and keep in mind, 2003 is the height of the mad cow disease. Pandemic or epidemic, whatever you want to call it. A pair of cows were talking in the field. One says, "Have you heard about the mad cow disease that's going around?" "Yeah," the other cow says. "Makes me glad I'm a penguin." I see, half of you don't even get the joke, I think. No? Who gets the joke? Please. Yeah, all right. Kenny, just explain the joke.
We expect the other one to be a cow, but
Yeah.
he says he's a penguin. So
Okay, but
So he's got it.
he's got the mad cow disease. That's why this cow thinks he's a penguin. That's why the joke is hilarious, if you just understood it. Okay, so yeah, exactly. Our expectation is that there are these two rational cows talking to each other. Of course, it's fictional. And then our expectation of the second cow being rational is suddenly upset. It's reversed, right? When we realize that, wait a minute, the cow itself the second cow has mad cow disease. That's why he thinks he's a penguin. Okay, so that's just one example of this incongruity theory. I know it's corny, but I actually think it's very funny. Okay, so now, let's keep these three Western theories of jokes in the background as we now reflect on Sri Ramakrishna's use of humor and jokes and what makes them so distinctive. Because I think that the way that he deploys jokes and he uses humor can't be pigeonholed into any of these dominant Western theories. I think that we have to develop a new spiritual theory of humor to account for Sri Ramakrishna's use of humor. I was actually tempted, when I was thinking about what title to give this lecture, I was tempted to call it Jokes and Their Relation to the Superconscious, as a kind of reversal of Freud's jokes and their relation to the unconscious, but then I decided it would be too pretentious. I've already been accused of pretentiousness too much, and so I don't want to invite further accusations. So anyway, so Sri Ramakrishna's jokes, that I went for that, simple and, all right. So what is the spiritual theory of humor that I'm presenting to you? I see Sri Ramakrishna doing something really remarkable and something really original and unique. I see him as turning Sigmund Freud on his head. Because remember, Freud says that when we laugh at jokes, we're expressing unconscious desires and feelings, right? Of the lower self. These are things that we ourselves are ashamed about. With Sri Ramakrishna, when we laugh at his jokes, when he makes us laugh, we're not expressing our unconscious desires, the feelings of the lower self, but we're actually expressing our superconscious divine nature, our true nature as divine Ananda. We're expressing our deeper divine essence. That's my suggestion. So let me begin to substantiate this new spiritual theory of humor by going back to the Upanishads. Why did I start with this Taittiriya Upanishad passage about delight, Ananda? It's because God himself, God herself in Vedanta is defined as delight. In the same Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad, there's a very succinct definition of Brahman. Raso vai saha. In one word, saha means Brahman here. That Brahman is what? Rasa. Rasa is a very polyvalent word in Sanskrit and other Indian languages like Bengali also. So it can mean delight, it can mean bliss, it can mean joy, it can even mean fun. It can even mean humor. Especially in modern Indian languages, like actually there's a Bengali article on Sri Ramakrishna's use of humor. It's called something like Sri Ramakrishna, Rosharaj Sri Ramakrishna, Rasaraja Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna, the king of humor. It's an interesting article, by the way. I recommend you look at it, if you can read Bengali. So Vedanta, according to Vedanta, God itself is rasa, which means God is fun, bliss, joy. Sri Ramakrishna gives us the same definition. Hopefully we'll get to it. It's in the context of a joke. I'm not going to mention the joke now until we come to that context. But he says, God is Rasa Swarupa. In Bangla, Rosh Shorup. God is the essence of rasa, is the essence of delight. The true nature of God is delight and joy and bliss and fun. And the Upanishads, Vedanta tells us that we ourselves, in our deepest essence, are one with God. We're sparks of that same divine bliss, sparks of that same divine joy. So when we laugh at jokes, we're really tapping into our deeper divine essence, which is nothing but joy. Let me give you an example from Sri Ramakrishna himself, because I think that he, in some places, explicitly endorses this kind of spiritual theory of humor. February 24th, 1884, he says, "The mother has kept me in the state of a bhakta, a vijnani. That is why I joke with Rakhal and the others. Had I been in the condition of a jnani, a mere knower of Brahman, rather than a vijnani, I couldn't do that. In this state, the state of vijnana, I realize that it is the mother alone who has become everything. I see her everywhere. In the Kali temple, I found that the mother herself had become everything, even the wicked. Because God is bliss, Divine Mother is bliss and joy and fun, and he sees that Divine Mother has become everything. How can he not be in bliss? How can he not joke? He's joking with Rakhal because he sees Rakhal as God, the same divine joy in everything and everyone. So his natural, spontaneous state is one of sheer joy." Another example, briefly, October 5th, 1884. Some monks are visiting Sri Ramakrishna. And there are also many devotees, as usual. I'll read directly from the Gospel. The devotees in the room remained silent. Sri Ramakrishna was smiling a little, a picture of self-contentment. He appeared happy in his own self, capital S self. One of the sadhus whispered in the other's ear, "Look, this is the state of the Paramahamsa." Sri Ramakrishna then says to M, in a state of ecstasy, "I feel like laughing." Sri Ramakrishna smiled like a child. So it's a spontaneous state to be laughing, to be in joy, to be having fun, because God itself, God himself, herself is fun. God herself is bliss. So now, with all this, with this kind of new spiritual theory of humor in the background, let's dive into some of Sri Ramakrishna's jokes. And I want to suggest that he uses different jokes, he tells different jokes, always with a spiritual aim in mind, but that different jokes serve different spiritual purposes. So I want to talk about 4 spiritual purposes in particular. There are probably many more, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are many jokes. I'm sure all of you have your kind of favorite jokes that maybe you're hoping that I'll talk about. I hope I talk about some of them, but this can go on for hours if we talk about all of the jokes, because the gospel is full of jokes. So I'm just going to, as I said, tip of the iceberg. I'm going to mention just some of his jokes, and I want to categorize them in terms of these 4 different spiritual purposes served by his humor, by his jokes. So the first, I see him as, of course, I already said he's flipping Freud on his head, right? Because laughter is not an expression of our unconscious desires, our lower self, but of our higher divine self. I also see him as flipping the superiority theory on his head. Remember the first of the 3 Western theories that I talked about. When we laugh, we're not laughing because we feel superior over other people, superior to other people. But what he does with his jokes is he makes us laugh at ourselves. You'll find this again and again. And he himself sets the example. And I want one of my favorite jokes in the gospel. I have to share this with you. But before I get to it, okay, before sharing the joke. Sorry. It's all the suspense is building. So I really think that one of the greatest spiritual lessons Sri Ramakrishna taught each one of us is to learn to laugh at ourselves. This is something that I think, especially in the, people are so self-serious, they take themselves way too seriously. And we're almost over this COVID pandemic, but there's another kind of pandemic, a psychological pandemic. Depression is extremely pervasive now. And I think that, now, I don't at all mean to trivialize depression, and of course sometimes medicine is absolutely necessary. But I think that from the people that I've talked to, friends and others who struggle with depression, one of the things I find is they take themselves too seriously. And if they can learn to laugh at themselves, that itself will help in, I think, relieving their depression. Not necessarily curing it. I'm not saying don't take medicine, so please don't come away thinking that I'm saying any of that. No, but there are many different things. I think that you need to take a multi-pronged approach to things like depression. One prong is read the gospel every day, because I think this is a wonderful treatment. Because it'll teach you how to learn to laugh at yourself. So now we get to this. First of all, Sri Ramakrishna himself, one of the striking things about his humor is that he's often self-deprecating. And so I want to give you this an example of a joke he tells at his own expense. He's making fun of himself. It all begins December 6th, 1884. And he's giving very lofty philosophical and spiritual teachings about Krishna and Krishna's relation to Radha. So remember, he often teaches Brahman and Shakti are inseparable. In that context, he's saying Sri Krishna is the Purusha, meaning the male spirit. Srimati, Radha, is his Shakti, the primal power. The two are Purusha and Prakriti. And he goes on explaining it, and then he says, it is like fire in its power to burn. One cannot think of fire without its power to burn. Again, one cannot think of fire's power to burn without fire. So very lofty philosophical teachings, spiritual teachings. Then M writes, as Sri Ramakrishna finished these words, Bankim and his friends, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, who was a very famous Bengali writer at the time, Bankim and his friends began to whisper in English. So now they're speaking in a language Sri Ramakrishna doesn't understand. He barely knows any English. Sri Ramakrishna smiling to Bankim and the others. Well, gentlemen, what are you talking about in English? Adhar, who's one of the devotees who's talking, he says, we are discussing what you have just said, your explanation of Krishna's form. Sri Ramakrishna, smiling. That reminds me of a funny story. It makes me want to laugh. Once a barber, napit in Bengali, was shaving a gentleman. The gentleman was cut slightly by the razor. At once, he cried out, damn! Now, keep in mind, Sri Ramakrishna doesn't know English, but this is one of the few English words that he uses. Sri Ramakrishna himself is saying damn. At once, this person who's being shaved says, damn! But the barber didn't know the meaning of the word damn. He put his razor and other shaving articles aside, tucked up his shirt sleeves. It was winter. Notice the details in Sri Ramakrishna's joke. Tucked up his shirt sleeves. He's getting angry. It was winter. And said, you said damn to me. Now you must tell me its meaning. The gentleman said, don't be silly. Go on with your shaving. The word doesn't mean anything in particular, but just shave a little more carefully. But the barber wouldn't let him off so easily. He said, if damn means something good, then I am a dam, my father is a dam, and all my ancestors are dams. All laugh. But if it means something bad, then you are a dam, your father is a dam, and all your ancestors are dam. All laugh. They are not only dams, but dam, 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 da, dam, dam. Loud laughter at this point in the gospel. So you see what he's doing? He's making fun of himself because he doesn't know English, and so he doesn't know what they're talking about. Just see his humility, setting an example of humility to others. And as I said, he was a comedic genius, actually. And so if you catch these sort of subtle nuances and little details, like how he describes the barber getting angry, even though he doesn't know the word, what the meaning of the word damn is, he thinks that the guy might be insulting him. Tucks up his shirt sleeves, little details. It was winter time, so that's why he had them rolled down. All these things. So, I mean, some of you in the audience may actually be, I don't know, stand-up comics or have written jokes, or if you do, you'll know, or if you just, watch YouTube videos about how Jerry Seinfeld or Dave Chappelle or these great comedians write jokes. Every word matters. They think about every single word. For instance, the mad cow joke, it wouldn't have worked as well if instead of penguin, the second cow had said, if he had used the word tiger instead or something like that. Every word matters. There's something funny in certain words too. Sri Ramakrishna was a master at this. But of course, again, unfortunately, those who don't know Bangla they don't have access to the original jokes, actually, the original language. Try to translate, Dave Chappelle's jokes into German or Bengali, and they're not going to be be nearly as funny as they would be otherwise. So the same thing can be said about Sri Ramakrishna's jokes, is that a lot of the humor is lost in translation. That's just something we have to accept. But so for those of you present or online who know Bengali, let me just read this one in Bangla. Napit kintu damer mane jane na. So I'm beginning in the middle. The barber doesn't know the meaning of dam. Dam. So in Bangla he's using. Tokhon she khuttu shob shekhane rekhe শীতকাল যে আমার আস্তিন গুটিয়ে বলে তুমি আমায় ড্যাম বললে এর মানে কি এখন বলো সে লোকটি বললে আরে তুই কামা না ওর মানে এমন কিছু নয় তবে একটু সাবধানে কামাস নাপিত সে ছাড়বার নয় সে বলতে লাগলো ড্যাম মানে যদি ভালো হয় তাহলে আমি ড্যাম আমার বাপ ড্যাম আমার 14 পুরুষ ড্যাম সকলের হাস্য you can tell where he's saying if yeah you can almost right he's now that sentence was about if damn is something good then I'm damn everyone's damn everyone in my family is damn সকলের হাস্য everybody laughs আর ড্যাম মানে যদি খারাপ হয় তাহলে তুমি ড্যাম তোমার বাবা ড্যাম তোমার 14 পুরুষ ড্যাম সকলের হাস্য আর শুধু ড্যাম নয় ড্যাম 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 Okay. Shokoler uccho hasho in Bangla. Uccho means, loud laughter at this point. So people are rolling on the ground with laughter. So Sri Ramakrishna himself set the example for how to learn to laugh at yourself. Because by laughing at yourself, you're able to take a step back from yourself, not identifying so strongly with your own weaknesses, your own limitations, your own deficiencies, not obsessing about them, feeling bad about yourself. Take a step back, laugh at yourself, and you'll actually make spiritual progress. Because what is spiritual life but trying to reduce ego and ultimately eliminate ego? How do we become less egoistic? By laughing at ourselves. So that's an example of Sri Ramakrishna laughing at himself. There are many places where he uses jokes to poke fun at others. And you might think, well, that's kind of, that's rude, or why does he do that? No, because he's a spiritual teacher. And the beauty of his jokes when he's poking fun at other people is that by framing it as a joke, he doesn't hurt anybody. That's why he chooses to point out other people's limitations, their weaknesses, by means of humor, by means of jokes. So he's doing that actually out of his love and compassion, actually. And I want to give you some examples of this. One of my favorites is the fisherwoman. Many of you are probably familiar with this. Sri Ramakrishna says, one day, Keshav was the great Brahmo Samaj leader. One day, Keshav came here with his followers. They stayed till 10 at night. We were all seated in the Panchavati. Pratap and several others said they would like to spend the night here. Keshav said, no, I must go. I have some work to do. I laughed and said, can't you sleep without the smell of your fish basket? Ash chuprir gondo na hole ki ghum hobe na? Once a fisherwoman, now he continues, once a fisherwoman, Mechuni, was a guest in the house of a gardener who raised flowers. She came there with her empty basket after selling fish in the market and was asked to sleep in a room where flowers were kept. But because of the fragrance of the flowers, she couldn't get to sleep for a long time. Her hostess saw her condition and said, hello, why are you tossing from side to side so restlessly? The fisherwoman said, I don't know, friend. Perhaps the smell of the flowers has been disturbing my sleep. Can you give me my fish basket? Perhaps that will put me to sleep. The basket was brought to her. She sprinkled water on it and set it near her nose. Then she fell sound asleep and snored all night. Again, a lot of the humor is lost in translation. The last sentence is really funny. Sheshe ash chupri anate jol chite naker kache bho kore ghumote laglo. So in Bengali, snoring, he's using a kind of onomatopoeia, if you know what that means, which means bho. It's like literally what snoring sounds like. And the way he says it is so funny in Bengali. And then finally M says, at this story, the followers of Keshav burst into loud laughter. See the beauty of this joke. He's teasing Keshav, kind of poking fun at him, at the same time pointing out his limitation, which is that, you're still doing this yoga and bhoga thing. You want to do spiritual practice, but at the same time, you can't be in a purely spiritual atmosphere for too long. You have to go back to your wife and kids and your worldly affairs. It's poking fun at him. But and remember, all of his followers are there. But instead of humiliating him, by putting it in the form of a joke like this, everybody's laughing together. And then there's a twist to this joke, I want to suggest at least, which is, we ourselves might be laughing and ha, look at how worldly Keshav is. Until you start to realize, wait a minute, every single one of us is also that fisherwoman to varying degrees. Who is not a fisherwoman? Who here can say that I'm completely happy being completely immersed in spiritual life all the time, and that I have absolutely no worldly attachments or desires? He puts every single one of us in the position of the fisherwoman. That's the beauty of this joke. We laugh at Keshav, at the superiority theory. We feel superior over Keshav. And then immediately the joke turns back against ourselves. And we realize we're not superior to Keshav. Keshav was in fact a highly evolved spiritual aspirant. Sri Ramakrishna himself praised him for his spiritual qualities. He said when he saw him meditating that he was the only one in the room, in a large hall, that was actually thinking of God deeply and concentrated on God. So where are we in relation to Keshav? That's the question that this joke actually should raise in our minds when we think about it deeply. Another example, another one of my favorites. He had a very rich devotee named Jodu Mullik, a very wealthy fellow. This is from the Gospel, December 18th, 1883. From the temple, the master went to Jodu Mullik's house. He went to this rich devotee's house. Jodu was surrounded by his admirers, well-dressed dandies. He welcomed the master. Sri Ramakrishna loved him, keep that in mind. Master, with a smile, why do you keep so many clowns and flatterers with you? Bhar, Moshahib. Why do you keep so many clowns and flatterers? In front of the clowns and flatterers, he's asking Jodu this. Jodu, smiling, that you may liberate them. Laughter. So he's also enjoying the repartee. Then Sri Ramakrishna says, flatterers think that the rich man will loosen his purse strings for them, but it is very difficult to get anything from him. Once, a jackal saw a bullock and would not give up his company. The bullock roamed about and the jackal followed him. The jackal thought, there hang the bullock's testicles. Sometime or other they will drop to the ground and I shall eat them. When the bullock slept on the ground, the jackal lay down too, and when the bullock moved about, the jackal followed him. Many days passed in this way, but the bullock's testicles still clung to his body. The jackal went away disappointed. All laugh. That also happens to flatterers. So this is also very funny and very profound all at the same time. At one stroke, Sri Ramakrishna, by this joke, he's poking fun at Jodu for keeping all these flatterers and clowns around him, which is a sign of ego, right? Keeping an entourage is a sign that look at my own greatness, my own importance. At the same time, he's just, with the same joke, making fun of all of his flatterers and clowns, the people who are also listening to the same joke. And you guys are like the jackals who are waiting for the bull's testicles to drop, but they'll never drop. You're going to come away disappointed. But again, the joke, if he had just said it as a straight, kind of scolding, it would have been much harsher. But by putting it in the form of a joke, it's a much gentler way of pointing out Jodu's limitations and also the problems, the weaknesses of his own flatterers, right? So it's really out of love and compassion that he tells all these jokes. One more example. Well, how much time do you have? Because I want to get to all four. So anyway, so another example. June 15th, 1884. Many followers of the Brahma Samaj would come to him, this new religious movement. Pratap is one of them. He was a very prominent lecturer within this Brahma Samaj movement. So Sri Ramakrishna says to Pratap, one can very well understand the inner feeling, the bhav, of a teacher of your Brahma Samaj, because he belongs to that Brahma Samaj. One can very well understand the inner feeling of a teacher of your Brahma Samaj by hearing his preaching. Once I went to a meeting of a Hari Sabha. The preacher of the day was a Pandit named Samadhyayi. And can you imagine what he said? He said in the course of his sermon, God is dry. We must make God sweet and fresh with our love and devotion. I was stunned to hear these words. Then I was reminded of a story. A boy once said, at my uncle's house there are many horses. Oh yes, his whole cowshed is full of horses. Now the problem is, the humor of this is completely lost in translation because the Bengali is, ek goal ghoda. And it's even hard to explain it grammatically. It's like in one adjective, it makes it sound completely ridiculous. Ag goal ghora. If there are horses, it cannot possibly be in a cowshed. But you might be thinking, if you're just listening to the English, well, maybe they're poor and they don't have a separate horse shed, so they put the horses in a cowshed. But that it doesn't. In Bengali, that's not a possibility. It's just an incoherent statement. So just keep that in mind. So, oh yes, his whole cowshed is full of horses. Ag goal ghora. Now, if it was really a cowshed, then horses could not be kept there. Possibly he had only cows. What did people think on hearing such an incoherent statement? They believed that there were surely no such animals as horses in the shed. Laughter. A devotee. True, sir, there were not only no horses, but possibly there were also no cows. Laughter. Then Sri Ramakrishna says, just fancy to describe God, who is of the very nature of love and bliss and fun, as dry. Rosh Shorup, I remember I said that he gives a very succinct definition of God as Rosh Shorup, Rasa Swarupa, the essence of fun and delight and bliss. He says it in this context. It only proves that the man has never experienced what God is like. So see, again, what he's doing, Samadhyaya is not in the room, the Pandit that he's criticizing, but Pratap is. So with the same joke, he's pointing out, don't lecture unless you have a command from God to lecture. Don't lecture about God unless you've realized God, had some taste of the bliss of God. Okay, and then he ends with this very, I think, very philosophically profound idea. He says, what will people think when they hear this kind of lecture? They're going to think that there are no, what does he say? He says, there are no animals as horses in the shed, right? The idea is when you come away listening to these kinds of lectures, you're going to come away as an atheist or as an agnostic. You're going to become a skeptic about God. Because if people explain the nature of God in such an unappealing way, God is dry, we have to make God sweet with our own devotion, who wants to believe in God, right? So that's all packed into this joke. Now, so that was all the first spiritual purpose served by humor and jokes. The first one was helping us to laugh at ourselves, recognize our own limitations and weaknesses, but in a humorous way, so that we don't take ourselves too seriously, first. Second, he often uses jokes to convey very lofty philosophical and spiritual ideas. And I want to give you just a couple examples. One very big philosophical question, what exactly is God's nature? And how should we think of God? Sri Ramakrishna. This is from September 19th, 1884. Smiling. I have practiced all the disciplines. I accept all paths. I respect the Shaktas, the Vaishnavas, and also the Vedantas. Therefore, people of all sects come here. And every one of them thinks that I belong to his school. A man had a tub of dye. Such was its wonderful property that people could dye their clothes any color they wanted by merely dipping them in it. A clever man said to the owner of the tub, "Dye my cloth the color of your dye stuff." All laugh. See, again, sometimes he gives this joke in more detail, and I think it would be easier to appreciate the humor of it, but also if you read it in Bengali. But the basic idea is there's this guy with this magical tub of dye. You can call it a kind of universal color. And different people will come up to him, and he asks, what color do you want your shirt dyed in? One person says, I want it green. Dips it in that magical tub of dye, it comes out green. Next person comes. What color? Red. Dips it in the same tub of dye. There aren't separate tubs with different colors. The same tub. Lo and behold, comes out red. Another one, yellow. One clever person comes and said, when he asked what color do you want, I want my shirt to be in the color that the color of your tub dye itself. It's the universal color. It reminds me of when I was in elementary school. There's this thing called Genera hypercolor shirts. Does anyone know about these things? It's like you breathe on it and it turns different colors. So it reminds me of that. It looks like it's red, and then you breathe on it, and then it turns into like green and white. It's weird kind of. We should bring them back. So anyway. So again, he conveys a very lofty spiritual teaching by means of this humorous story. What is he saying? He would often say, I am a glutton in the spiritual field. I don't like to just think of God in one form or one aspect. I love to think of God as the all-comprehensive whole, in all forms, in all aspects. And it's by means of this joke that he conveys this very, very high spiritual teaching. He's a Vijnani, and so he doesn't want to just play one note on the flute. He wants to play ragas and raginis, right? Tunes, beautiful tunes. Another one, October 1st, 1884. He says, a man reads a little of the Gita, the Bhagavata, or the Vedanta, and thinks he has understood everything. Once, an ant went to a hill of sugar. Notice all the animals in his jokes, too. Once an ant went to a hill of sugar. One grain of sugar filled its stomach, and it was returning home with another grain in its mouth. On the way, it said to itself, next time I go, I shall bring home the whole hill. All laugh. So again, by means of this joke, where everybody's laughing, he conveys a very profound philosophical teaching, which he says in other places, Bhagavane kono iti ne, you should never put a limit to God. There is no limit to God. The moment you limit God by saying God is only Allah, God is only Christ, God is only Krishna, you've limited him. God is illimitable, God is infinite. And he conveys this very lofty teaching by means of this joke about an ant in the sugar hill. One more short example. March 11th, 1885, he's explaining the difficulty of recognizing an incarnation of God. He says, it is hard to recognize an incarnation of God unless the mind is totally free from lust and greed. A man asked a seller of eggplants the value of a diamond. He said, I can give 9 seers of eggplants in exchange and not one more. Again, a lot of this is lost in translation because he says it in such a funny way in Bangla. But the idea is that this person obviously has absolutely no idea how priceless a diamond is, and so is only willing to give 9 eggplants for it. Okay, so that's the second spiritual purpose served by his jokes, which is conveying very lofty spiritual and philosophical teachings. Third example. He often indulged in wordplay. He reveled in wordplay, playing with words. Again, this is completely lost in translation, unfortunately. But I want to give you some examples where you can still get the idea. One of the ways that he played with words was with people's names. And so let me give you at least one example. Vidyasagar was a great Pandit, Bengali Pandit, and he's speaking to this great Pandit named Vidyasagar. Vidyasagar literally means, Sagar means ocean and Vidya means knowledge. So it literally means ocean of knowledge. So, Sri Ramakrishna, today, at last, I have come to the ocean. Up till now, I have seen only canals, marshes, or a river at the most. But today, I am face to face with the Sagar, the ocean. All laugh. Vidyasagar, smiling. Then please take home some salt water. Laughter. Sri Ramakrishna. And notice his wit, how good he is at banter. Sri Ramakrishna says, oh no, why salt water? You aren't the ocean of ignorance. You are the ocean of Vidya, knowledge. You are Vidyasagar, the ocean of knowledge. You are the ocean of condensed milk. Now here again is completely untranslatable, unfortunately. Untranslatable, right? All laugh. So I have to just read this because otherwise. Nago nona jol keno. Tumi to obidya sagar no. Tumi je bidya sagar. Shokoler hasho. Tumi kheer somudro. Shokoler hasho. See, kheer is a Bengali sweet. That's what makes it funny. He's reversing. Vidyasagar, out of humility, is saying, if you call me the ocean of knowledge, then take home salt water. Ramakrishna says, no, but you're the ocean of knowledge, and knowledge is sweet. It's kheer, because it's a Bengali sweet. At the same time, there's a deeper spiritual meaning behind kheer somudro, the ocean of kheer, of condensed milk. What is it? Kheer is the place where Vishnu reclines on his serpent bed. That's called the Kshira Sagara, the ocean of condensed milk. That's why condensed milk just doesn't at all capture the meaning of this, because it's a divine. It has a divine connotation to it, actually. So anyway, this is all to prompt you to, if you feel motivated, try to learn some Bengali, and then you really enjoy his humor and his jokes if you can. Another example. February 2nd, 1884. A doctor comes to visit Sri Ramakrishna to treat him. His name was Dr. Madhusudan, which is a name for Krishna. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Dr. Madhusudan arrived. While he prepared the bandage for the master's arm, he had just broken his arm, Sri Ramakrishna, so he's come. Sri Ramakrishna laughed like a child and said, you are the Madhusudan of both this world and the next. Dr. Madhusudan, smiling, I only labor under the weight of my name. See, this is like the person who is always feeling inadequate, insecure, I'm not good enough. Sri Ramakrishna smiling. Why? Is the name a trifling thing? God is not different from her name. Satyabhama tried to balance Krishna with gold and precious stones, but could not do it. Then Rukmini put a tulsi leaf with the name of Krishna on the scales. That balanced the Lord. So notice what he's doing here. This is a person who's humble to the point of being sort of almost feeling bad about himself, feeling like he's not making much spiritual progress. I'm just going on doing my medical work, but look at this great saint. You know, where am I compared to him? And Sri Ramakrishna gives him encouragement and says, your very name is the name of God, and that's not a trifling thing, because the nama and namni are abheda, which means the name and God himself or herself are one and the same. So always have a positive attitude. Sri Ramakrishna would always emphasize that. Tell yourself, I'm a child of God. How can sin cling to me at all? I have no sin. I have no bondage. And finally, a fourth purpose that I want to mention. Of course, there are many others, but because our time is limited, I wanted to mention this fourth purpose, a spiritual purpose served by Sri Ramakrishna's jokes. He sometimes used jokes to bring people together, to unify people. And sometimes, even when these people were in a huge conflict, I mean, when people hated each other. So this is another one of my favorites. October 27th, 1882. Sri Ramakrishna tells Keshav. Now we need a little background, because Keshav, I told you earlier, was one of the great leaders of one sect of the Brahma Samaj, which is a very popular religious movement in the 19th century. But there were other sects of the Brahma Samaj, and they didn't like each other usually. And so another leader of a different sect of the Brahma Samaj was named Vijay Krishna Goswami. Vijay. And they're both sitting there, and they're really angry with each other. Okay, so now that's the context. Sri Ramakrishna to Keshav, look here, there is Vijay. Your quarrel seems like the fight between Shiva and Rama. Shiva was Rama's guru. Though they fought with each other, yet they soon came to terms. But the grimaces of the ghosts, the followers of Shiva, and the gibberish of the monkeys, the followers of Rama, would not come to an end. Loud laughter. But I think all these are necessary. While Sri Krishna, himself God incarnate, played with the gopis at Vrindavan, troublemakers like Jyotil and Kutil appeared on the scene. You may ask why. The answer is that the play does not develop without troublemakers. All laugh. There is no fun without Jyotil and Kutil. Loud laughter. So see, there's tremendous tension between these two groups of the Brahma Samaj, between the leaders and between their followers. And there are a few things that he's doing with this joke. Number one, he's making a profound point here, which is that you'll find this in many cases, that the leaders of certain sort of philosophical or spiritual movements, they don't necessarily criticize each other so much. But the followers are much more angry, belligerent, nasty. This is very common. You'll find this again and again. And he's pointing that out. He's making, that insight is contained in the first part of the joke. But the second thing he says is he's giving this very deep spiritual interpretation of the whole course of events. He's saying there's a divine purpose behind even your quarrel with each other, and all this quarreling between your followers and Vijay's followers and Keshav's followers. That all of this has a spiritual purpose. What's the purpose? It's all part of the divine leela, the divine play. Because if everybody is well-behaved and everybody's sattvic, as Holy Mother used to say, then everybody will attain liberation immediately. That wouldn't be any fun. So then Holy Mother said, so that's why God introduced Rajas and Tamas. And then the play could really go forward. Then God will really have fun. So Sri Ramakrishna is making a similar, very philosophical point by means of this joke. So, I'll wrap this up. Instead of, as I said, I want you to think for yourselves about which jokes you like the most, and then maybe you can consult somebody who knows Bengali and ask them about the original Bengali, and then you can really appreciate the real comic essence. But just to sum up what I've said, let me just emphasize four things. Number one, get rid of the idea that in order to be spiritual, you have to be dead serious. Because that might be true in other spiritual traditions, but it's absolutely false in our tradition. And I think it's very important to keep in mind, because as I said earlier, many of us take ourselves way too seriously. So learn to laugh at yourself. And if you make a daily habit of reading the gospel, then it'll help you to learn to laugh at yourself. Second, there's a deeper spiritual and metaphysical reason why laughter and humor play such an important part in our spiritual tradition. Because God himself, God herself is bliss, it's rasa. God is ananda, God is rasa, God is fun and delight and joy. And so by laughing, see, some of us might think, in the course of our spiritual practice, when we laugh at jokes, is this spiritual or not? You know, we sometimes feel that way. We should absolutely have no compunction about laughing. Because bliss and laughter is the nature of God. So by laughing and having fun with other people, we're expressing our own divine nature. So that's the second point to take away. Oh, I actually combined points 1 and 3. So the third one is learn to laugh at yourself. Try not to take yourself so seriously. And fourth, I've already said this, but I'm going to say it again. Make a regular habit of reading the gospel daily. You're going to find that if you read it, because it's a very unique spiritual document. There are many spiritual scriptures, there are many great saints who have, and many of their teachings have been recorded. But the gospel is so unique because it's so full of humor. That's one of the things that makes it so unique. And by reading it, you're not just going to benefit spiritually, but you're going to benefit even just in your day-to-day life. It'll brighten your day. Thank you. Announcements, but I don't have a brochure up here. Can you just hand me the brochure? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so announcements. Next Sunday, the 30th. That's July, but next week is July 2nd then, right? Okay, thank you. We've got a special guest Swami coming from Toronto, the Vedanta Society of Toronto, Canada. Swami Kripa Mayanandaji. His topic will be how to worship God. July 4th, there's no class. What should I say about Trabuco? July 4th, Trabuco. Let me go there.
You probably don't know because you haven't been here for July 4th.
It would be my first.
This will be your first time in Trabuco. It's a wonderful gathering of people. It's our biggest event of the year of all our centers. And of course, it's been really small the past couple of years, but because of the pandemic, we expect 300 to 400 people to come to Trabuco, and there's worship in the shrine, and there's a beautiful meal prepared by the devotees and the monks, and then there's an afternoon program. So if you can, make it down, do some carpooling, come down to Ramakrishna Monastery, Trabuco on July 4. That starts at noon, right? That at noon, the worship starts at noon, and there's lunch, prasad lunch at 1:30, and then the program at 2:30. So, and the topic of the talks for the program is Swami Vivekananda's vision for the West. And then an additional thing connected with Swami Vivekananda, on the following Saturday, July 8th, we have our annual program, annual Vivekananda Day at Vivekananda House in South Pasadena, the house in which Swami Vivekananda stayed for several weeks, 5 weeks, I think, in 1900, 5 or 6 weeks in 1900, he stayed there. So the house is still reverberating with his presence. And we have a worship service, and then a reading from the time that he was there, describing the time he was there, and then food afterwards, some kind of refreshments. So that's on July 8th at 4 p.m. at Vivekananda House in South Pasadena. So those are the major events coming up.
Thank you, Maharaj.
And you will go to the greenhouse living room?
I will. I'm going to go to the greenhouse to field any questions or comments you might have. There are refreshments outside. And thank you for this joyous occasion. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. I was confused. So I can leave now.
You can go.
I was getting confused. Go to Texas for a few days and then I forget the whole system. I don't know, that was my cue. So.